Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining. The last couple of presentations, we've covered very historic themes. So the first one was the history of the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia. And the next presentation was talking about the lives of the new martyrs in Russia. Today, it won't be a historical base, it's actually much more contemporary. About a month ago, a little over a month ago, I went to a missions conference, the Arizona Missions Conference, which was in Phoenix area. And I also went with Anatoly and Mark, they attended, and a few other people here also attended. So I'd like to take this opportunity, since it's fresh in our memories, the talks from that conference, I'd like to discuss some of the highlights and present them and share them with everybody here. And it's just a good opportunity, since we've had the mission a little bit over half a year now. We haven't really talked about, some of the challenges and some of the things to expect along the way. And we haven't really talked about finances and things like that. So this gives us an opportunity to kind of just share some of those ideas that we might have and discuss them, and then just make sure that you have an opportunity to ask me any questions that you might have about our future here in Tucson. I'd like to just quickly introduce the first speakers. There was Metropolitan Jonah, and he used to be the Metropolitan of the Orthodox Church of America back in 2008, 9, 10, up to about 2012, I think he stood down. And he's now a retired bishop, and he's with Vocor now, and he was an invited guest to the conference. He spent a lot of time back in the 90s and early 2000s when he was a priest, setting up mission parishes in California and along the west coast for the OCA. He also set up a monastery in California, which was very successful. Then he became a bishop, and obviously he was responsible for the mission work in the OCA as the first hierarch there. Then he left and retired, but even now within Vocor he serves at a parish, and he serves in a young monastery. So about half a year ago he founded a small monastery in Virginia where he lives. So there's a parish which he serves as the parish rector, and then right nearby is the monastery which he's founding. And already there's about 10 brothers. So in about half a year to go from 0 to 10, that's a really good achievement. And he makes sure that all the brothers don't rely on people's donations, but for the moment while they're still young and working, they all actually have secular jobs. So I think there's an engineer or two and a couple of government contractors and Uber drivers and all sorts of things. But basically everyone's responsible in his little monastery to carry their weight. And so basically he talked a lot about not just the financial side of starting a parish, but also the spiritual side. And then we had next speaker was Father Hans Jacobsy. He's a priest now in Florida, and he's been a priest about 20 years, I think, with the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese. I think he's with the Antiochians now. I'm not too sure, but he's served in established parishes, and he serves in fresh parishes from start. And he had some really good stories to tell about his experiences there. Then the next priest who spoke at the conference was Father Thaddeus Hardenbrook. He serves in California, and he's been a priest also almost 20 years. And he's kind of had a slightly different perspective, being that his parish wasn't a mission, but it was already an established parish, which his father passed to him, and he had to keep it going. But he had a lot to say about community and supporting one another and living a Christian life. And so there was some interesting points he brought up which were relevant to our mission conversation. And then Father John Peck, who was the organizer of the conference, he spoke last, really briefly. Before I share my highlights from the conference and summaries, now that I've introduced those four main speakers, I'll let Mark come up and share his impressions. He was in attendance, and I asked him to speak for 5 to 10 minutes, just about some of his impressions and what stood out to him and things that he'd like to share with the rest. So Mark, if you could please join us.
So I'll start with right slide with Metropolitan Jonah. So mainly I'll just kind of share what kind of stuck the most and what was most interesting to me. So Father Jonah, he stressed that we don't, well, as a mission, for a mission to grow, you don't necessarily need to go out and call people and actively search for new parishioners. As he said, God will bring people if there's a place to bring them to. So, and for that to happen, each member of the parish should focus on working on their self-development, first of all, obviously spiritually, and growing love in their soul, and having love to their neighbors and supporting others. And he mentioned that even in his monastery, sometimes they have people come. Some become brothers. Some just work there and become or learn a little bit more about Orthodoxy. And some of the people that come there, once they're leaving, they thank the brothers for the amount of love and attention and just warmth that they experience there, because in America, not all families, unfortunately, are very loving, and family experiences can be a bit harsh. So if a person feels this, and every person has the need for that love, and so if a person by chance encounters one of the parishioners of a parish that does have this love inside of it and this warmth, it'll automatically click inside that, like, this is what I've been missing, this is what I want more of, and I'd like to contribute, and also be able to share that love with others around me as well. So that's one of the main points that that Father or Metropolitan Vladika Jonah made, and so there's a lot obviously that goes into that, and it's a long journey, and it's everyone's journey and task to become a good Christian, follow the Orthodox way, and if we focus on ourselves, that will help the mission grow by creating an atmosphere to which people, to which God Himself can bring people. Also, I'm not quite sure if it was Vladika Jonah or not that mentioned it, but also someone did mention that it is still acceptable to offer to kind of like your friends or co-workers or something to stop by a parish, the mission or a church, just especially if they know that you go to church on Sundays, and you try to read your morning prayers, or just try to live a Christian life in general. They might be curious as to what is actually going on, and sometimes if you offer a person to go with you one weekend, they might even accept. You shouldn't push it so that it's not like, oh, come to church, because then it becomes probably similar to a sect, you could say. But just offering it once, a person might accept, and it might be that little nudge that they needed to at least find out about the path of Orthodoxy and maybe even walk that path. So I'll try to keep it short. So for Metropolitan Jonah, if I miss anything, my dad will fill in. And should I switch the slide to
you can.
next speaker? Okay. So the next one that I'd like to mention is Father Thaddeus. Now, his mission is quite unique, you could say, and quite big, and there's a lot of, they have a lot going on, you can say, and they're very developed and advanced from what we heard. And I believe even his father actually started the mission, and he continued, so it's kind of going on from generation to generation. But one of the interesting things that I kind of as a young man brought out from that is the question of schooling. So many people either have children or plan to have children or have grandchildren, and in the United States, the public education system has been slowly getting worse and worse with each year, especially with Arizona, where we're quite down on the list of public education, let's put it that way. I myself went to a charter school, so it was a bit easier there, and even that was 10 years ago, and I've heard that a lot has changed over the 10 years. But the last news that kind of I heard from Father Thaddeus is that in public schools, if you have more or less like Orthodox, or maybe not even Orthodox, just Christian kind of conservative views on the world, you're not only considered maybe like a loser or strange or something, but you're actually, people are starting to emotionally harass and bully children for those points of views. So it's like if you don't support something that everyone else is supporting, you're not only strange and an outcast, you're also a bad person now. And that's emotionally heavy, especially for teenagers and stuff. So, and I know a lot of families, especially in the Orthodox, kind of in the world of Orthodoxy, they homeschool their children, but Father Thaddeus also mentioned that that's kind of like a hit or miss. So some parents, they do have that talent of teaching, and they're very patient with their kids, and homeschooling can be great, but there are also cases where the parents don't quite live up to their own expectations, you could even say, of a homeschooler, and then the kids are, well, I don't know, I don't want to use the word miserable, but there's a lot of problems that comes out of that. And so with the parish that Father Thaddeus has, they have their own school, and that allows them to bring kids up in a Orthodox and very kind of correct and environment, and makes them, well, it can kind of preserve that, what's the word I'm looking for, the wholeness or correctness of thoughts and thinking. And he even mentioned that before they would actually let the kids go to a few of like the last years of high school to allow them to find out, the various things that do exist in the world. But while they're still under their parents' protection and guidance, and they return home in the evening, which is a little more of a controlled environment than having them go through, K through 12, kind of isolated, and all of a sudden go to college where they're shocked by all this stuff, and there's no parents to return to or to kind of notice certain things. But as he mentioned, they're starting to kind of roll back on that as well, because when they let these kids out to high school, they're starting to get bullied there, and it's not quite working out as well as that used to work out. So kind of thinking ahead, a parish can be very beneficial to the education of the children, grandchildren, of the parishioners as well, because it allows them to, I'd say, become more developed as a personality and have less of this pressure, telling them who they can be and who they can't be, what they should be, what they shouldn't be. So I think that's around like 7 minutes, so I'll probably hand it over to my dad and let him fill in.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Now Mark's father, Anatoly, will be sharing his recollections from the conference.
Yes, so I'm ripping up dividends of bringing a good kid, so I don't have to talk too much. I guess the biggest thing that I get from the conference and the general underlying thought and idea, I think, was that the world is becoming more and more aggressive and more irrational, and worse and worse and worse. And our duty as Christians and just as good people is to protect ourselves and protect our kids, because it's the influence of the world is not always like upfront, and sometimes it's very sly, and it's kind of like the water that dissolves stones, right? So we need to have a mission or a parish that would kind of protect, to use as a fortress, as a protection from the world. So that was the main thing, the main idea, I think, that was there, that we need to imply some measures to protect us from the aggressiveness of the world in the next future years. And of course, Mark mentioned some of the things that are to serve to protect us. So to start a mission in very general terms, you need people. Well, you need a priest. We have a priest. We need people, and we need people that are kind of devoted to that feel kind of the same, that think the same, kind of a uniform, more or less, and a uniform thinking of body of people that will support this community. And it's kind of, I don't know why, but it's always keep me, coming that it's a fortress. So the first thing in the fortress, you need to build walls to protect yourself. And not walls to not let some people in, but to protect from the influence of the world and not to be dependent of this world to bow to the things that it offers. So you need people and you need finances and you need some other things, right? You need to build the church, you need to build the school, you need to do this and that. And but it's a big thing that you don't ask and you don't actively seek for that. What you concentrate on is your own development, just as Mark said, and development of the spiritual part of the thing. So if you concentrate on prayer and on self-development and of doing good things, then people are drawn. God wants to save everyone, and He will draw people to that community, and community will grow inevitably. It will grow. So the money issue is an interesting issue. So there was this Protestant people who would say that, oh, you know what, we taught in the school how to do the sermons about like giving, or the what is it? Tithing. Десятина. Давать десятину. And some of the fathers, I don't remember who, he said, you know what? It's all the matter of priority, right? And you just need to know that if you don't give 10%, you jeopardize 90. So if you give 10%, you protect the 90% that's left. And he had this story of his son who was always given, and he said, start with kids and give them some allowance and give them $10 and tell them, okay, $1 you need to go to and give to church. So they kind of learn what to do with what is the economics of all that. And he said that the son was given, and then he had this beautiful motorcycle and he wrecked it completely. And he was alive and only scratched, but he returned back and he was upset and almost crying. He said, why are you crying? Oh, this motorcycle, it cost a lot of money and now it's lost. And his father said, well, have you been given 10% to the church? And he said, no, I stopped to do that. I said, well, that's why. And there was also, I can't remember the end of the story very well, but there was exact amount of this motorcycle price. The repair cost, the repair cost was exact amount that the 10% of the time that he didn't give to the church. So it's interesting, and you don't have to do anything, but you need to understand where your priorities are. If you really want to build a community, you need to start with yourself. And in order to build a community, you need to give the 10%, at least 10%, maybe more. But 10% is your contribution in your future and in the future of this community and the growth rate. So I know that I'm talking too much, and let me see if I have some notes here. Yes, the community. You have to live no more than 10 minutes away from the church. 10 minutes. 10 minutes is a rule. So if you live no more than 10 minutes away from church, then you can have a spare time, and you know that there's a service, and you can go to the service and service the Father to praise the God. You also have your neighbors that live close by, and you babysit your kids, you share the tools, you help each other. That builds friendship, that builds community, that cements the people together. So it's kind of imperative that the church has to be surrounded by the houses and dwellings of people who go to that church to be a strong community, to be a really viable community that can withstand to the influence of the world. Yeah, so basically this all I have. There was a lot of interesting ideas, but these few are the ones.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark and Anatoly. Any questions for Mark or Anatoly before I kind of summarize my observations?
Surely one of the problems with living in the United States is that it'd be really tricky to try to find a church that's only 10 minutes away, right? I mean, especially in Tucson.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit more about that. So a lot of the points that I want to quickly cover, Mark and Anatoly, thank you, you covered, so I won't have to go into too much detail. So basically, you know, here we've got a church under construction, so that's what we're going to get to one day, right?
I like the snow one.
I don't know what's new can get it.
So yeah, Metropolitan Jonah, pretty much a lot of what Mark already covered. People are looking for love, and he retold that story about that summer boy who came for the summer and helped at the monastery, and how he didn't want to leave when it was time to leave at the end of summer, because for the first time in his life he actually felt that someone was loving him, and he didn't want to leave the monastery because of that feeling. And so essentially we need to keep that in mind, that we don't know who comes in through the doors when we're at our church here at Holy Virgin. That new person who comes through the doors, we don't know what life journey they've been on, what difficulties they've encountered. So we have to be very careful to be friendly and open and warm to them and show love. And we don't know whether that our warm welcome to them will be reciprocated, whether it would have an effect on them. But our hope is that we at least will do the right thing in welcoming them and making them feel welcome, and then we'll see how they feel and react to that. You know, some people, may take time because it's foreign to them and have to leave and wait a while and then come back again and leave and come back. Or maybe someone will be ready and feel that's exactly what they're looking for and be ready to join our parish right away. We don't know, but we need to make sure that we create that atmosphere for those people to come. And Metropolitan Jonah, like Mike said, doesn't actively missionize. He doesn't go and knock on people's doors and set up activities to bring people to the church. He just prays, and they concentrate on their prayer rule, and slowly, by working on their own spiritual salvation, God shows that they're worthy to have new members come to them. Then he also, Anatoly was talking about the financial side. There was a lot of talk about finances, and I don't want to spend a lot of time accenting it, but it is an important topic, and now's a good time to bring it up. So just a few, little, points that were poignant, I felt. Metropolitan Jonah said, mission effort will never grow without supporting the clergy, partly because if you're not supporting your clergy and you're not supporting the building and looking after the building and taking care of it, new people come in will think that we don't love God because we're not outwardly showing the care and love to God's house and to the servants in that house. So that's part of the reason why. And he talked about tithing. Yes, it was a big part of how to make that happen. Of course we're very small, and obviously to a lot of people the idea of tithing might be foreign. Yes, if you're from a Protestant background, then yeah, you grow up hearing about this and you're taught about this, and from a child you're given an allowance, and then you wreck your motorcycle and then you're taught a life lesson. But a lot of us haven't been brought up in such a community. And so the idea of tithing is foreign to us, and we think, oh, that's from the Old Testament. Christ came and it's the New Testament. We don't have to observe tithe anymore. But Christ never, annulled tithing. He never got rid of that commandment. In fact, he said, "Give everything you have and come follow me." So obviously we need to find a balance. But essentially, a lot of priests say, and Father John Peck says his rule is, give 10% plus 1. So your rule should be, should do more than the Old Testament elders did. So you give 10% plus 1, and that should be your New Testament tithing. So I thought that was a good way of looking at it. But, that's something we have to start with. Maybe 2% is all we can start with, and then we can build up to 3% and then get to 4%. But essentially it's an attitude to God's blessings. So it's not so much giving money to the church. It's not about what the church gets from that. It's about what you gain from giving back to God and giving back to God's church. Because if you hold on to everything that God's blessed you with and don't share, well, then you're basically building, digging your own hole in the ground and burying that treasure. You're not sharing it. You're not doing anything with it. So we need to make sure that we have that right attitude to those blessings God gives us. And we know how difficult it is to get rid of it just a little bit more. He wants us not to be attached to those possessions. He wants us to be worried about the spiritual. So if we tithe freely, then we won't have that connection and that earthly things tying us down. Father Hans was the next speaker, and he spoke about his experience, and he's talking about the spiritual condition of the parish. And he said one parish he went to, straight away he could tell that there were problems. He could tell that there was backstabbing, there was slander, there was judgment of others within the parish community. And he just came out and he said, look, if we're going to be judging others and treating others without love, then this parish is going to die, because we as the church family, we need to be showing love. And then when we show love to one another and we show love to God's house, then the parish will thrive. But if you're not going to do that, I may as well just walk away and find another parish where people are serious, because it's not worth my time. And he said, if you find yourself as a priest in a parish like this, where people are not focused on the one thing needful, it's only a community club where it's just a place where they socialize and they just have certain, other responsibilities, then to just let the parish die. Because you need to find a place where people are going to take church seriously and their spiritual life seriously. So I thought that was an interesting point he had. We're coming to a missions conference, we're talking about growing missions. He says, well, just kill it if it's not going to work. So that was one thing that stood out to me. And he just said we have to focus, Galatians 3:26, for ye all are children of God by faith in Jesus Christ. So we need to have that faith in Jesus, and then we'll be worthy children. And so we need to grow in that stead. And so that's the first thing we need to focus on. And then, like Mark said, he says, when you put the spiritual first and you put your own spiritual growth first, then other people around will sense it, because that's from a different world. Because our orthodoxy is a special treasure. And if we protect it and if we live by it, when we share it just a little bit with the outside world, then people see that it's something different, and then they'll be attracted and will want to come to it. If we do a bad job of living a Christian life, then when we do share it, they won't be attracted to it. So we really need to focus on that. And then just in practical terms, Father Hans was saying, just be transparent about the money. Money shouldn't be taboo. Just be transparent. Don't constantly talk about it. No one wants to hear about, they need to tithe, they need to tithe. But if you have a need, just approach the parish and say, look, this is broken, that needs fixing. Please, let's just donate the money to fix this, and then people will. When people see that their money is being spent correctly, then they'll be happily give to that need. So don't try to be tricky or have any gimmicks. Don't focus on maybe annual fairs and other things. Just focus on the prayer life in the church. Focus on whatever mission, charities you may work in your parish. Focus your energies on them, and then when the needs come, they'll sort themselves out, and the right people will come who can help. And he had quite a great story about his latest parish. It's 8 or 9 years ago. He started just in a Holiday Inn. So basically he rented a ballroom in a hotel. He made a deal with the hotel manager for a certain price, discount to use their room every Sunday for services. And for 4 years, he started with a group of basically 10 people, and it grew maybe to 20 or 30, but a small group for 4 years. Every Sunday he kept on coming, setting everything up, having the service, packing it all away. But he made sure that he had the regular services and that they focused on their spiritual lives. And then, an opportunity came where they could move out. They had a little money saved up. They could rent a larger place. And 4 years after that, same thing. They focused on the services and the life of the church. And then slowly, surely, they gradually grew. And 8 years after, from this first group where he thought it might make it, might not make it, they got to the point where they could raise $700,000 in a charity drive. And they bought a 5-acre property with a church building on it. And now they have a 5-acre property in Florida, I think an hour away from Fort Lauderdale. They have a church building on there, and then they have 120 regular parishioners every Sunday. and people want to be part of that parish life. So in 9 years, that could be us. We could have 120 people in our parish. We could have a 5-acre lot of land with a church built on it. So we just need to not focus too much on that, but with God, all things are possible if we put everything correct and in the right perspective. Father Thaddeus, yes, he focused a lot on the community. He pointed out, he talked a little bit at the beginning about, COVID-19, and he had a good reminder saying that, crisis does not make it, but crisis reveals us. And that's kind of like part of the point I wanted to bring up in the last presentation with the new martyrs. That like Saint Vladimir, for example, when he was in the monastery in Kiev, those men sought him out and came and took him. And then they killed him by the monastery wall, and he just said, "Stop, let me pray first." And then he forgave them before they killed him. He just didn't do that like in an instant. That was the fruit of many, many years of spiritual growth for him to be at that point, for him to be worthy of that martyrdom. And when the time came, then he was able to respond in the correct Christian manner. And it's a similar thing, when any crisis comes to us. We have hardships in our life. How do we react to them? Do we take them with peace? And do we turn to the Lord for help? Or do we rely on our own self-strength? Do we get agitated in those sort of things? So we need to focus on all the temptations and difficulties in our life. They're for a reason. They're for us to grow spiritually. We need to make sure that when a big thing happens in our lives, that we act accordingly in reaction. One of the ways that he's able to support, very active parish, and over the 45 years that they've been in that location, they've moved twice. So this is the third location they've been, and they moved once, and then 3 miles up the road they moved, and a few miles up the road they moved, and from these moves he was able to very accurately determine the perfect distance away from the church building that people would come. And he noticed that when it moved just the 3 miles, that certain people, because it was more than 10 minutes away, they came less, and then the people where it was less than 10 minutes, they started coming more. And then he kind of saw these trends, and then he kind of did an overall look over the 300 or 400 parishioners he has, and he noticed these trends actually where people live and their proximity to church and how often they come. And so we're looking for people, who aren't just going to come on Sundays. We want people to be available to participate in the church community. So like Anatoly said, if you're having a Vespers service on a Karpist in the middle of the week, then if it's less than 10 minutes away, you're like, oh yeah, I can just get to church quickly, and then I'll be there to pray and leave again. But if it's a 30-minute drive or 40-minute drive, then you're like, well, it's only a 45-minute service, I don't know if I'm going to do it, and stuff like that. One analogy he made was, it's important not to come to church just on Sundays. It's like, think of praying at home as eating well, and think of praying in church as exercise. But if you want to be physically fit and healthy, you can't exercise just one time a week. You need to exercise multiple times a week. So think of church as being healthy and spiritually healthy. So if we understand that through our physical experience that we need to exercise more than one time a week to be healthy, then spiritually we need to exercise more than one time a week just on Sundays. We need to do more than that to be spiritually healthy and to grow. So there was a couple of interesting points he brought up, and Mark talked about the school, so I won't talk about the K-8 school, but I did think it was an interesting idea how right at graduation from grade 8, Father Thaddeus gives them a catechism so that they're ready when they go to high school to deal with the barrage of worldliness and everything that'll be the attacks that they'll go under. And one of the ways that they get so much money in their parish is through a thrift store in their town. Everyone supports the thrift store, and that's how they're able to pay the mortgage on the church, give back to the community. So the church isn't taking and not giving back, it's giving to the community. It's supporting the local fire department, it's supporting the high school basketball team, it's supporting all these community things, and that's what the church should do. It shouldn't just hide away from civic life. It should be a member of the local community to be giving back and supporting the good things in the community. And then another thing that they do in their parish, for example, it's very expensive in California, in that area where the church is. So to give assistance to maybe young couples or who recently got married, or young families who are looking for a new home, they would give loans to those people for a down payment. So if they needed a $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 down payment, the church would just give them that money, and then they say, don't pay us back until you've paid off your mortgage. Then once you've paid off your mortgage, then you can return that that money back to the church, and then we can share that on to the next family. And that's a great thing to do. It'd be wonderful if we got to a point where we had a large property that our church was on, and we had multiple houses on that property, and then we were able to help people with down payments to build houses and buy houses nearby within that 10 minutes, and then constantly grow the community and reinforce the community. We're a long way, but if everyone started tithing and giving, then those sort of things may become a reality. So it's just something to keep in the back of your mind. And he talked about, like St. Pachomius, how St. Anthony went to the desert, but he was in solitude. But St. Pachomius was like, well, the gospel, we need to love God, but we need to love our neighbor too. How can we do that in complete solitude in the middle of the desert? So he founded the communal monasteries, and so it was good for Father Thaddeus to remind us that humans, since we're created in the image and likeness of God, and God is a Holy Trinity, the three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, we naturally want community. We want to be with people. So as an Orthodox parish, we want to be close to our Orthodox brothers and sisters, and that's natural. And so that's just something to keep in mind. It's not a crazy hippie idea, even though Father Thaddeus grew up before he became Orthodox in some commune in California. Yeah, they had those ideas, but there's a way that there is something lacking in today's world, especially in 21st century America, where parents live very far away from their children, and they never see them, and but if you have them close, then you have built-in babysitters, and then share tools and do all those things that Anatori mentioned. Those things can be great. It's difficult, but it forces you to grow spiritually. I mean, it's very difficult to love your neighbor, but it's easier to kind of just lock yourself in your house and forget about what your neighbors are doing. But if those neighbors are actually part of your church family, you have to have relationships with them, then you have to kind of work things out, and you have to kind of overcome some of your pride, and you have to work through some of those difficulties that you have with interactions with other people. So it's a good perspective to have that, we can, even if we're not part of a communal monastery, just as a community parish, live close to one another. We can, share in each other's struggles and grow together spiritually. So just some ideas. And another thing he said, just don't focus on the world going down the drain. Don't get obsessed with Fox News or whatever. Just stay away from all that. Just focus on your spiritual life. Yes, the world is changing around us, but if we have a community that supports one another, and if we put God first, we'll be fine. And when we have a community, we'll have more of an influence on the world around us if we're together. Because if we're on our own, isolated, we're not going to have an influence on the world around us as much. Maybe we will. Maybe we'll save 1,000 around us. But if we get all together, then we'll have much bigger impact and more positive influence on the world around us as a community. Yeah. So just quick segue into just our monthly reports. So every month, just because I think it's important to have that transparency with our finances, which was one of the points which was raised in the conference. Each month I send out a monthly report about how much donations we've received, how much has come in, and basically what our expenses are. How much has gone out, and glory be to God that we're covering our expenses. Even right from the very beginning here, we had more coming in than was going out, and that's great to see. But if we're talking about buying land and building a church, we need to really grow our nest egg, and it's going to take a lot of collections, a lot of giving to get to that stage. To kind of keep that vision in mind, I think it's actually healthy, in addition to just looking at what's coming in and what's going out. Right from the beginning, let's think about how do we support a church building, like a building fund, and how do we support the clergy? Because a lot of missions, when they're starting out, they're put in a situation where they either have to make a choice. Do they choose to buy land and build a church, or do they choose to pay a priest? Well, they shouldn't be put into that choice. And so to avoid that choice here, right from the beginning, right from this coming month, I'm going to be setting up the statement to kind of have a category for future building and for future clergy. I won't take any money from that because, I won't take any money from the church right now. But if we put aside that money in that category, in that bucket, then that can grow. And eventually, if we're ready to, and we've grown to a degree where we need a second priest and have satellite missions, we'll have that money there. We can invite a second priest and grow. Because that's kind of the model that we were looking at, that's all detailed in this booklet. The model isn't that we're here to start a parish and once we build the church, we're done. No, the idea is that we start growing and developing, and then as we're growing and get to a stable financial situation, and we have the resources, as in people, the human resources to share, then we find opportunities to start new satellite missions. And we send people there, and they have services, reader services, and the priest visits them once in a while. Then when they grow, then they need a full-time priest to serve them full on, and this other parish still needs another priest. And then you get another priest, and you grow, and you're constantly supporting one more, and that's how you're spreading the gospel. It's I wouldn't say it's invasive the way we're just magically popping up in towns all over Arizona, and here's an Orthodox church, and we're going to convert everyone around. But it's a good model to kind of just to remember that our work is not done ever. We always have to continue growing, and we shouldn't just be like once we get to established parish, be like, oh, we have a building, it's beautiful, it's paid off, we pay the priest, we have enough people that come, that's it. No, there's always going to be more, and we should be doing that through prayer life, because if we're just focusing on just external charities, that's great, but we also need to be focusing on the prayer life and spiritual life. So we should be having missions and churches all over that support making the greater world holy through our prayers. So essentially, with the financial report, I'm just going to keep it really simple, just arbitrary number, but 50% of the donations which come in will aim to cover our operating expenses, and then 25% and 25% remaining for clergy and the church. And so, maybe it'll be less than 50% will cover in operating expenses, which means more that came in will be contributed to those funds. So I'll have these buckets, and then at the end of the year, or the treasurer, if we find a treasurer, another one here, we'll present, our financial health. And it's good for us to always have those goals. But otherwise, if we're just keeping up with the immediate expenses, then that's all we'll do, and we'll never move forward. We'll be like, oh, we're paying the bills, we don't have to worry about investing. But if we try to always put aside some funds to future projects, then we know that they're going to grow month over month. And so if we looked at the last month, in June, for example, we had our donations was $3,965.60. We easily covered our operating expense, which was $2,875. So, is the delta here from here to here, that's how much we saved. But if we look at it and we cut it off at 50%, this will be operating budget. Then again, we'll see that we actually overspent by this much, or we didn't get enough coming in to meet that 50%. So this kind of gives us a reminder, yes, we covered our expenses, but if our goal is to always leave money for the future, then something has to change here, either minimize our operating expense or increase our donation so that it covers this sum. Any questions about my harebrained scheme? We'll see how it goes. I'll keep reporting on it. If it doesn't work, that's okay. Father John Peck. So he finished up. He organized a conference. Basically, his strategy to tithing, because he doesn't want to talk about it all the time. His strategy is the STUN strategy, which is strategic, total, utter neglect. So basically, he never talks about giving. So he basically, when he catechizes new members of the parish, they cover tithing, they cover giving. They sign a letter saying that they're going to support the parish when they become members. And so basically, they're accountable and they're responsible. And so he doesn't believe that he has to remind them. They know what they're expected to do. And so just let people be responsible. We're all adults here, so we don't have to have the priest hitting people over the head saying, where's your money, where's your money? I'm kind of in that same kind of school of thought. But, if we need to talk about the spiritual implications of tithing, and giving and what it means to be attached to the earthly things, I'm happy to have those discussions with you. And like Mark said, invite people to church. You know, we don't have to go around with brochures and tell people, you have to come, you have to be saved. No, but if people know that you're an Orthodox, and you shouldn't hide that away, I mean, you should be comfortable and say, I'm Orthodox, I'm a soldier for Christ. And they'll say, oh, okay, what's your church like? We say, well, it's like this, and invite them. And maybe they'll come. And if they come and they like it, great. And then they'll tell their friends. It's an organic way that we can grow. So just try to remember that. And this is from Father John's booklet. I thought it was an interesting point to sum up the whole conference. So mission work, his definition is, this is the planting and establishing of Christian parishes, specifically in our context, traditional, vibrant, reproducing Orthodox parishes, emphasizing the proclamation of the gospel and imparting the spiritual tradition of healing and spiritual growth. So, the healing and spiritual growth is the aspect that Metropolitan Jonah really covered. The model that I was just mentioning, where once we get a bit more established, then we start thinking about how do we establish a satellite mission and how do we support a second priest to come and help them. That's the reproducing part. Okay, so we want to have the reproducing Orthodox parishes. Tucson shouldn't be the only Orthodox parish in southern Arizona. There should be more. Mission work properly done includes both evangelism and outreach. However, to confront injustice and alleviate suffering without imparting the gospel or planting churches for the edification and healing of souls would make the church a social welfare organization, not the body of Christ. So that's where we need to be careful that we're not organizing all of these charities, and we're so busy with these charities and ways to serve the community that we're too tired to pray, that we forget our spiritual growth, and that we end up being, a St. Vincent de Paul, organization or Salvation Army, rather than being actually the body of Christ. So it's just a word of warning. Obviously, there has to be evangelization, there has to be charity and community work, but keep things in perspective. So I thought that was just a good thing to end on with that. Naturally, probably some of the things I've said to you, maybe you disagree with, or maybe you're concerned about. That's totally natural. The whole point is for us to have a conversation, and if you don't feel like asking questions now, talk to me later in the week, and so we can kind of understand where we're coming from and how we do with that. There's going to be 1,000,001 ways that Satan is going to try to find to destroy this mission, to break us apart. And so even if we are of one mind and one heart, if we find one little thing that's going to create a difference, he will amplify that difference and try to break us up, and so that we get pride in the way and get offended, and then we break off. So we need to be aware that that's a reality. There is an unseen warfare, that there really is an attack on us spiritually, whether we're aware of how active that attack is or not. Let's be smart, and let's try to put God first and pray and fast and attend the services and support the church financially. Do all those things correctly, and with God's grace, we'll be able to overcome those temptations. And St. John of Shanghai and San Francisco, he had a lot of difficulty when he came to San Francisco in 1963, and he was trying to build a cathedral, because before him they tried to build the cathedral there, the Holy Virgin Cathedral, Joy of All His Sorrow, and they had difficulties. And then he came and he was trying to finish the building work, but then they took him to court, and they were slandering him and saying there was embezzlement, and all sorts of temptations came up, because where there's this money, when often there's temptation, and people try to make an issue of it. That's why we just try to have the correct attitude to the treasures. That's why we just try to be transparent about things, not be tricky. But God is always going to be on our side. So remember, there'll be people that we don't expect, where we think there will be support coming from. Instead, they'll actually be the ones who will be the naysayers. And so we shouldn't be surprised, and we shouldn't be overcome by those temptations, because we'll know that God's on our side, and if we're building a temple to the glory of God, and if we're doing God's work, then we will have those temptations and difficult experiences. But let's remember that God's on our side, and that we can overcome those things. and we together will form a good church family and a good foundation for a future church. And may God grant all of you who are participating in the founding of His mission many years and great strength, so that we worthily fulfill this calling. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. We'll end with a prayer.
Thank you so much.